Hey everyone, I'm Nicole Rucker from Fat and Flour Bakery in Los Angeles, California. And today on the Vegan Butter Academy, we're going to be talking all about sugar cookies. In this class, you're going to get 3 different sugar cookie recipes: a traditional shortbread, a roll-out sugar cookie you can cut shapes out of and bake for a holiday party, and a traditional style cakey sugar cookie. The difference in the ingredient ratios is going to change the way it acts in the oven as well as how it tastes in your mouth. So in the shortbread recipe, this gets baked in a vessel, so it's not going to change shape very much. You're going to press it into a pan and it's going to stay in that form until you break it apart and eat it. In the roll-out sugar cookie recipe, you don't want it to change shape. It's going to have the most gluten production, it's going to be able to hold its shape in the oven, and it's not going to spread. When you get to the modern sugar cookie recipe, it has a lot more sugar, the ratio is a little different, and you want it to spread out in the oven. You want it to melt down while rising up with the leavening agent, so it creates like that chewy, crispy on the edge, but cakey in the middle texture. The main thing that signifies a sugar cookie for me is the absence of brown sugar. So you'll see all the sugar here is white granulated sugar. So the color is going to be lighter, it's going to bake a lighter color, and the texture is going to be totally different than say a chocolate chip cookie, which is brown sugar and white sugar mixed together. Butter is one of the most essential ingredients in cookies, especially, both because it is a carrier of flavor, but also because it is an inhibitor of gluten. So the butter is going to coat the flour granules and it's going to prevent the amount of moisture that can get in there and make gluten. I've created some really simple recipes for you to help you master the basics, but there's a lot of room to play by adding spices or flavors to suit whatever kind of vibe you want to go for in your sugar cookie. Definitely like and subscribe so you can learn everything there is to know about baking with vegan butter. The first recipe I'll be sharing with you is a traditional Scottish style shortbread. I love shortbread because it is deliciously buttery and rich, and it's great with tea, and I also love that it's one of the oldest recorded cookie recipes. And the main thing that signifies that it's a shortbread is the fact that the gluten is not heavily developed. So it's got a large butter to flour ratio. So when you eat the cookie, it's gonna melt in your mouth and be crumbly, and it's gonna be super rich, which is also one of the reasons I love it, because it's super rich and buttery. To start, we're gonna put the flour and the sugar in the bowl of the mixer first. Start it on low. We're really just fluffing and mixing the sugar and flour together a little bit, and then we're gonna add the fat. So this shortbread recipe is the traditional Scottish style, which means that you incorporate the fat into the dry ingredients rather than starting with creaming butter and adding dry ingredients after you cream the butter. So the way we add this butter is we just start the mixer on low and kind of add in 1 chunk of butter at a time. And the paddle is going to break up the butter into uneven pieces. Once we have all the butter chunks in, we'll see this uneven pebble texture that we're going to turn out and bring together on the marble. Here we have perfect, sandy, uneven pebble texture. The pieces of flour are nicely coated in fat and the color has changed. I don't want to knead it, I just want to bring it together into a dough. You can just do that by gathering it up and pressing. We're going to make this mound and we're going to bring in our prepared pan. So beforehand I prepared the pan by buttering the back of a piece of parchment paper, and then you just take your shortbread mixture and we're just going to press it into every inch of this plate. You want to get it as even as possible so it bakes nice. And then I like to take my thumb and just kind of go around the edge to press down so that there's not like a thin section that's kind of sticking up. Once it gets into the oven, the butter is going to melt, and also the sugar is starting to melt, and the sugar melting with the butter and the flour is what's going to hold the shortbread together. And we're going to use a bench scraper to score it, This makes for easy breaking off. The tradition with shortbread is that you would just break off a piece. You would buy this whole circle and then you would get a little piece of shortbread, break it off. I like to just cut it lightly into the surface with the bench scraper, not going all the way down. After you have it scored, you're gonna dust the surface with sugar. You have the extra sugar on the side, and you just make sure that it's all over the top. And the only thing left to do is bake it. We're gonna pop this into a 325-degree preheated oven. We're gonna bake it for 20 to 30 minutes. What we're looking for is golden brown right at the edge. It's gonna be set in the center. There isn't gonna be any rising or like expanding. It's pretty much gonna stay in place, but we want a nice even color in the center. The next cookie I'm going to be showing you is a rollout sugar cookie. This recipe would be suitable for making like a Valentine's Day heart-shaped cookie or like a holiday cookie, anything you want to retain its shape after it's baked, so it's not going to spread or move in the oven. It's just going to stay in the shape that you cut it out. The biggest difference between the shortbread recipe and the rollout sugar cookie recipe is that the ratio of the ingredients is quite different. We have more butter, we have more flour, and we have more sugar, but we're also introducing a moisture aspect by adding a vegan egg and some vanilla extract. Because I'm using unsalted butter this time, I'm also going to add a little bit of salt to the recipe just to season the dough. This butter is at perfect room temperature. It's going to cream up really quickly. I'm going to add the sugar. And then we're going to turn it on medium high for a couple of minutes to let it get really nice and creamy. So what we're looking for when we're creaming butter and sugar together is for the mixture to get really smooth, almost like it's becoming frosting. And then it starts to get even fluffier as more air is incorporated into the mixture. This is a nice glass bowl, so you can kind of see almost if there's going to be butter hiding, and it looks really good. We're going to mix our vegan egg replacer. So we have 25 grams of egg replacer, and I'm going to add some cold water to it. You want as few lumps as possible, but it does create a pasty gel. So now that that is in there, I'm also going to add the vanilla extract. So now that we have the butter and the sugar and the egg replacer and the vanilla all in the bowl, we can add our flour and our salt. And we're gonna do that in 2 parts because we don't wanna make a big mess, and also because we wanna mix it very slowly. So that's why we're adding the flour in 2 stages. A little bit in. It's very important that you start it on low or you're gonna have flour exploding everywhere. And then I'm gonna stop. You can kind of hear the tension change once the dough is ready. It's done. Now that the dough is fully incorporated, we're going to chill it for at least 2 hours. And this gives the gluten a chance to relax so that we don't make a chewy, tough cookie. But it also gives the butter a chance to chill again, which makes the shape a lot sharper in the oven after we cut it and pop the cookies in there. I just took my dough out of the fridge. It's been in there for 2 hours. I took it out about 15 minutes ago so that it can temper and it'll be in a nice rollable consistency. And I'm going to lightly flour this marble slab. You can also do this in between 2 pieces of parchment paper if you don't have a marble slab. That just helps with the rolling so that it doesn't stick to the surface of your counter. And you gently roll. You barely have to just roll away from you, roll back, and you're just moving the dough out into 1/4 of an inch thickness, Just want to make sure it stays even. Just be gentle. You take your cutter and you just dip it in a little bit of flour to make sure that it doesn't stick. I like to get as many cookies as I can, so I start at the edge and go as close to the edge as possible. I've cut out all my hearts, and now I'm going to bake these in a preheated 350-degree oven for 8 to 10 minutes, just until the edges take on a tiny bit of color and are a little golden. Perfect vegan rollout sugar cookie. The final cookie we're making today is called Crystal's Perfect Sugar Cookie Recipe, and it's named after my head baker at Fat and Flour, Crystal Shelton. The difference between this sugar cookie recipe and the shortbread and the rollout cookie recipe is leavening agents. We have both baking powder and baking soda. Baking soda is going to give us a nice golden brown color, and baking powder is going to give us a nice cakey rise. When we mix those two together, we have the perfect balance of cakey rise and chewy texture. Another element to Crystal's Perfect Sugar Cookie recipe that is different from the other two is there's more sugar in it. This is mostly for flavor, but it also adds to the texture and the moisture level of the dough. That's going to give us the cakey kind of texture in the middle and a little bit of chew at the edges as well. I'm going to get started making these sugar cookies by cutting the butter into a couple of chunks. I'm going to add the butter to the mixer. I'm going to add the granulated sugar. And again, the same process to creaming applies. We're going to mix this on medium-high speed for a couple of minutes until it gets really creamy and smooth and the sugar starts to break down. I'm going to scrape the bowl again and make sure there's nothing hiding before I continue on with the recipe. The creaming process looks a tiny bit different because there's more sugar involved. And then you can see this is a little bit more frosting-like. It's just a little bit stiffer, and it does need to mix for at least a minute longer before we move on with the recipe. So while that was mixing, I mixed together my vegan egg again, and I'm gonna add this to the bowl. I'm gonna mix it in, and this can go on medium speed. We're going to add in the vanilla bean paste. So before we move on, we need to introduce the leavening agents to our flour. I like to mix these together in the bowl before I add it so that I can make sure that I don't get like a pocket of baking soda or baking powder in there. Make sure that you don't see any lumps of baking soda in there. That can be lumpy sometimes as it sits in your cupboard. Half now and half in a little bit. So there's half the flour. Mix it on low speed so you don't have an explosion of flour. Just until the flour gets a little bit incorporated. And then add the next batch. You can hear the difference in the sound again. It's a little bit slower as the tension of the dough changes just ever slightly. So, dough is ready to go. These cookies are great rolled in standing sugar or in sprinkles. This sparkling standing sugar has a great texture once it bakes. It's also so pretty. It's very important that you pick up the cookie dough and kind of pack it in with the back of your palm and level it off so that it's flat. And then you have a nice little cookie ball. Today we made 3 really reliable, delicious sugar cookie recipes. We have our traditional Scottish style shortbread cookie. It's crumbly, it melts in your mouth, it's very fragile and easy to break apart. We have the roll-out sugar cookie dough, which is tender but firm and holds its shape in the oven. So you can see these nice, beautiful hearts came out absolutely perfectly. And then we have Crystal's Perfect sugar cookie with a little bit more sugar. It's easily changeable to whatever kind of flavoring you want to add to it. And it has a wonderful, chewy, soft texture. It stays soft for days if you store it in a Tupperware container. And when you use the Miyoko's butter, you can really taste the quality of it in this cookie. Hope to see you guys again soon.